Hello again, gamers and gamettes, and welcome back to Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm your host, Jeremy, and once again we have my good friend Blaze.
I think you guys must be getting sick of me.
Well, yeah, he's supposed to be a regular guest, but he's been here for like the last 4 episodes. So, over the next few episodes, it will be just me. However, we will, of course, have him back at some point.
When I get back around to it.
Yeah, basically. He's also. We're making the plan of him recording the solo episode on a game I've already discussed. So do keep an eye out for that for however long it takes to get to it. But
sometime in the future, when I get around to it, time and whatnot.
yeah, but basically. But all that is for the future. So we'll just move straight into the episode topic. Now, this week we'll be talking about Prototype 2. So I'll quickly start this by saying this is another game that Blaze has introduced me to that I never would have played if it weren't for him. And originally I played it almost to the end, but then suddenly stopped playing it. And then recently, like I think about 2 weeks ago, I went in and finished it, and over like 3 days I finished the game and ended up platinuming. Yeah.
The story does get a bit repetitive after a while, like its mission type. So I can understand why you lost interest. It's the same, follow this guy, dress up as this guy. It does get repetitive.
It's not so much that it was repetitive. I just found I was moving on to other games, and then I would see it and I think, yeah, I'll play that later, and I just was saying that for too long. Because I wanted to talk about it, but I just, it's not so much that it was boring. I just took priority for other games.
Actually, I found that with Vampire. I really love Vampire, but I just found I was moving on to other games and didn't have time for it. But that's another good game, which we may or may not discuss later. I'll talk to Jeremy about that. But it's not hard to, if you download games, multiples. By multiples, you do get sidetracked, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm really bad for getting sidetracked. So.
Oh, me too. I tend to have a bit of a short attention span, so I can, after a while, think, I want to do something else. But, that part isn't important. But, today we'll just be discussing various parts of the game. So, we'll start now, pretty much. Alright, so let's start it with audio and visual. As I always do, audio and visual is the very first and most important thing to talk about. Now, firstly, I will mention this is an older generation game. I don't know exactly when it came out.
It was remastered for PlayStation 4, but it was originally a PlayStation 3 game.
Yeah. But even then, like the remaster is still old enough that it is like less good by today's standards, so that
I wouldn't even really say it was a remaster. It was more a copy and paste because a lot of the graphics don't even look much better than the PlayStation 3.
Yeah,
it came out in 2012. 2012 was when it came out.
The remaster?
No, the original.
Original? Okay.
The remaster, I'm not quite sure when it came out.
Okay. But yeah, as you said, sort of those types of things, sometimes they're not fully remastered. They don't look that much different. It changes a couple of textures, that's about it. Maybe it makes the color more vibrant. It doesn't really do enough to change significantly.
So it wasn't, just to put it out there, it wasn't actually a remaster. It was a copy and paste because you cannot buy a disc version of it.
Okay.
It's an upload of the original PlayStation 3 game that you can download.
So it's not remastered at all then?
No.
That makes sense.
It's just gone from console to console.
Okay, I thought it was a bit altered, but that's my mistake. Now, first of all, I would say I would love to see it remastered because there's a lot of cool stuff, and if it was remastered, I would buy it like that.
Even for its age, like when it first came out, it was visually stunning. Like what we talked about with Far Cry 3. This one, I'd put this one that trumps Far Cry 3 in its visually stunning age because it was it was supposed to be dark. It was supposed to be not gothic.
Dreary.
Dreary, and it pulled that off very well. The character that you play as was very mysterious himself, and they did that very well with the colouring of the environment that he's in. The weapons were detailed beautifully. When you swish your weapon around, it gives that glow. Like
and we will talk about the weapons a little bit later, but
I'm just talking on a visual side of things.
Yeah, on a visual sense. And not just that, I think as you upgrade the weapons, they can look a little bit different.
Oh, they
just
do.
a little bit. I think obviously it's not new for every single upgrade, but you can notice a difference between when you first get it to the end. It looks sharper, that type of thing, you know.
Let's look at the Hammer Fist. You know the Hammer Fist? When you upgrade that fully, it actually has spikes on it. You start with just the fist, and when you fully upgrade it, has spikes on it.
Yeah.
So
and it's sort of like, for example, the big arm blade, you can see sort of it gets sharper. It, like, visually you can see it gets sharper, which is good. A lot of games tend to lack that side of things, and for a game to have weapons which already look good but change as you upgrade it more is always really good for it.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, of course, so that's the big visuals. As I said, the characters, the talking is pretty good, like visually with it as well. Like visually, you can definitely see that they are saying what they're saying, whereas some games of the age didn't do that very well at all.
Well, they tried to dub it and it didn't work all that great.
Yeah, but this one I actually genuinely have no problems with. It looked pretty damn good for me.
Sounded good, looked good. Audio and visual just was spot on with this generation.
Yeah, and the audio especially, it was very good. The combat sounds were different for each different weapon.
You could hear the blood splatter, and it was beautiful.
You could hear everything, and that is why I appreciate it so much. Even now, it holds up pretty well. Like, it's graphically and well, I don't know how to say audio that way, but you know, the graphics and audio do still hold up to a certain degree, and this is a very old game. It will be considered quite old now. So just, if I were to see that visually and audio remastered, that would be incredible. So I hope for that, but even then it doesn't really need it. But we'll move on. As we mentioned the weapons earlier, we'll quickly talk about that bit now. Now there's 5 different weapons, main ones. You've got the claws, the arm blade, the tentacles, the hammer fist, and the whip. And you unlock them through each stage of the story. You reach a certain point in the story, you unlock a new weapon. And what it will often do is you unlock it by consuming either one of the undead or one of the people with that power, and that's how you unlock the new weapon, which is good from a story standpoint and holds up well because you're combating something new, and then because you've experienced it, you now have it. I like the way they did that as well. And having the 5 different weapons is good, and you can change them in the middle of battle. You can change, and you have 2 weapons that you can equip using triangle or square, and as I said, you can change them at any time, which is really good for a game.
I really liked all the weapons. They were all very unique in their own way, obviously. I have found, even after I unlocked all the weapons, I spent the majority of my time with the big ass blade for the simple fact that it was fun.
I always had the claws equipped.
I always had the big ass blade as my square, because square is my primary button. But in my triangle, it always varied. Like, if I was up against like helicopters and stuff, the tentacles,
the whip, if you want to be able to attack from a bit of a distance, it was always good.
I found the tentacles, if you could shoot them at the helicopter, and it would drag everything to the helicopter and blow them up, and that made it really easy to deal with helicopters, in which just made the game. It just made the game fun.
Yeah.
The one thing I do want to point out that I really loved the look of it, the feel of it, and the usability of it was the shield. I loved the shield.
Yeah. When I got back to the game, I forgot I had a shield. So mine was always dodge. Because when you're battling one of them, you can jump at a certain time and dodge. And I found I was always doing that. So when I played it again and saw there was a shield, I was like, oh, okay. And I found I didn't use it that much because I loved the use of dodge and attack. I loved that aspect. So I tended to move for that side of things rather than the defensive.
So I love the shield. I used the shield. I always forgot I had the shield, but my last playthrough, I loved the shield. The shield was always my main go-to.
Being able to time it so that you knock a weapon back to them.
You knock the missile back to them.
Yeah, that I loved. And there was actually an achievement for that, which I had fun getting. Yeah, you have to do it a certain amount of time, and I had to do it like 2 more times to fully get the trophy.
So I only did it a couple of times. I haven't platinumed this game. I've completed the storyline and some of the side missions. I haven't platinumed those, so I haven't got as... I have finished it story-wise probably a few more times than you, but I haven't.
I've done it twice.
Yeah, see, I had this game on the PlayStation 3 when it first came out, as well as the PlayStation 4. I love the game in general, but the weapons were very well done.
Yeah, definitely. And as we mentioned earlier, visually they all looked really cool, and that's always an essential for a game. Is if you have a badass weapon, it has to look like it.
I love, like, as I mentioned before, you know how in God of War 3 when you swing the Blades of Olympus around. Blades of Olympus, Blades of Chaos around, and they got that big red line. Now the weapons in Prototype 2, or the arm sword does that too, and that's an effect I really love.
Yeah, it interacts.
That line of just it just shows pure power.
Yeah, and that's good for the style of game. Again, it's sort of, I wouldn't say it's essential, but it's preferred, you know. And yeah, this game does that absolutely brilliantly. Now, this is one Blaze hasn't really been as familiar with, but I will talk about very briefly, and that's the New Game Plus and the skins and other unlocks. First of all, the skins I found I really liked because you could choose a transformed look where instead of just having your arms with the weapons looking like the monster, you could make your whole body look like that. And I liked that. You could choose one which was big and bulky, which is for Hela, and one which was more agile, which was for Alex Mercer. And I found I would alternate between those. Those were the 2 costumes I used, but you could also use a zombified version of the characters. That it obviously is only cosmetic, but is a very cool detail, and I very much think it benefited from that. And as well as that, you can unlock a few certain powers, which obviously that they will prevent any trophies, but you can get extra superpowers. Like you can do a lot more damage, you can fly further just by activating them.
I have played with those cheat codes. I think they call them cheat codes or cheats in the
game.
Cheats. I've played with a few of those, and they're enjoyable for a while, but then after a while they just become tedious, and I play less of it.
Yeah, it's fun to let loose for a bit. That's about it. You don't want to use it all the time, but yeah, it's there, and I think that is good. And so again, briefly on the New Game Plus, I think this should be an essential to all games nowadays. Going from to New Game Plus, you don't have to go through the upgrading process all again. You just start from scratch and do the story so that you can just, again, let loose. I love having that in there, and so when I did it for this, it made it a bit more fun. I think I still had to... Actually, no, I didn't. I didn't have to unlock the weapons again, though I wouldn't have minded as much. But I had the full upgrades, which allowed me to get the rest of the upgrades that I may not have had. So you could still progress normally, but you've got the powers from the start. You can do more from the start. It makes it enjoyable being able to just let loose in a new game, but still experience the story fresh. And yes, as this should really be an essential to most games because it's just fun. It's really fun, and that's as simple as I can explain it. So just briefly on the story, and we'll try not to go too in depth in case people haven't played it yet.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Obviously, as I said, it is a very old game, but sometimes, for me, I will be playing a years old game that I didn't know anything about, and spoilers could frustrate, so we'll try not to spoil much, but the basics of the story is your character goes from being a regular human to he gets infected with a virus, which is what leads to him being able to get the powers that he has. And it's it is a virus by definition, and also it is called that in the game. And what you have to do is you have to go through the game and fight corrupt people, we'll say.
The organisation itself is corrupt. The organisation trying to control the virus is corrupt, but then
they're trying to control the population itself as well.
As you get through the story, you find things out that we're not going to disclose here because, as we said, spoilers. But there's a lot of shock. There's a lot of shocks. There's one big shock, and you're like, oh. But the story, I was very happy with the story, the way it went.
Yeah.
The start was, it had that sad aspect, but then by the end, you were like, I'm happy now.
Yeah, things
turn around for this dude.
Yeah.
I'm happy for him,
It's also an interesting aspect. Now, I will say your guy was part of one of these organizations.
He was,
basically.
He was just military. He wasn't actually part of
not the specific one, but he was told certain things by this organization. And you have him come into terms with the fact that not everything they say is true. He believed everything he was told, and you're watching this character slowly realize things aren't as simple as they seem, and exploring that, trying to change things, trying to make things better because these people have done so much bad, right? So as he's not part of the organization, but he was influenced by them. And that's always an interesting aspect, is having to fight one's own beliefs because you've been presented with evidence which goes against that. And so I think the way it was done, the way the character was designed, really represented how I think any real person would when they started to uncover similar things. There's shock, there's denial, there's anger. You go through all the stages of grief one by one, and it's a realistic aspect. Obviously, this is a sci-fi game, but has at least some basis. You can see what humans would normally do. It's realistic in the spaces it counts.
I haven't got much more to comment on the story except that it was very well done. The ending was awesome. It was an ending that you sort of expect, but it's
still exciting. It's not surprising, but it's exciting.
Yeah, you still love the ending even though it wasn't a surprise.
It's worth all the work. Let's put it that way.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So as a story, I loved it. The story was really good, and very very fitting for the type of game. So we'll move straight on and just briefly talk about the characters because they are similar. Firstly, you play as Sergeant
James Heller.
James, thank you. I couldn't think. So James Heller, and you start off human. you get it infected, you get these powers, and you move on. You have allies who help you throughout it. You have some who help you by being double agents. So you don't encounter too many other characters, but you do have a few, and they help you through certain missions. They guide you so that you can complete your mission. And they're fairly one-dimensional, a lot of them, because you don't see them for long enough to get much out of it. Again, this was a PlayStation 3 game, so it's not as long as games are now. So each character is not very well explored, let's put it that way. So you could complete this game in one day. If you went just straight story, you could complete it in like a matter of hours.
Yeah, like 8 hours is maximum it took me to do.
Yeah, so it's shorter, understandably, but the characters, even though you don't know a hell of a lot about them, it fits what you would expect that character to be. You know, you come across someone who works for this organization, and they're exactly how you'd expect them to be. There's just something wrong with them that they're a horrible human, and that's why they work for that organization, you know? Yeah.
I'm happy with the gameplay.
We're talking about the characters.
Sorry, I'm reading the wrong note. I'm off my own little well. I'm happy with the characters. Sorry. I'm happy with the characters. Like, James was... Yeah, he had his heartbreak, and I felt that. But then he had his happy moment, and I felt that.
Yeah, you relate to him.
And you start to think he's just a mindless killer, but he hears something, and he doesn't end up killing the guy he wanted to kill the whole time because of what he heard. And
yeah, he's human.
It reminds the player that he's human, and it was big. It was like a mindless killer. Oh wait, he's still human. Like, and all the people he encounters, from Father Guerrero to what's that secretary's name? I can't remember. She worked for the bad guy. You know, from him to her, like
Galloway, I think.
Yeah, that's the one, Galloway. Like from and all the characters you meet are all well done. None of the characters are ever the same. They're all very different people.
Yeah,
and
they're not explored completely in depth, but enough that you can understand them, if that makes sense. Like I said, they're really not that in depth, and they're not, but just enough.
The
just
life
enough.
Story isn't there, but it's attainable. Like you can find little black boxes and stuff, and it tells you a little bit about it, but they're not. It's not in-depth stories in every character. You get an in-depth story to the main character and the antagonist, the one that's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Because the antagonist is the guy from the first one, and you get big in-depth into those two because they are the important ones, not these little side characters that end up dying anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, even the side characters are explored just enough that
it keeps you entertained. You know who they are.
Yeah, exactly. It is a good balance. So the characters, really, I don't think they could have been done much better than they were. Simple as that. Perfectly. Okay, so the last thing which we have to talk about is the gameplay itself. Now, first of all, it's simplistic, which is very much in its favour. You could do button mashing, basically, but it also has certain combos which will do more damage. So it's easy to understand, difficult to master, and that's just perfect. As we mentioned earlier, being able to change the weapons in a click of your fingers, that really adds into it. So if you're having difficulty in one battle, all you got to do is change weapons, go at it again, and you're sweet. Obviously, that's the combat itself. The combat is the most important part because that's the style of game it is. But as well as that, there's more to the gameplay. You can run around, you can climb walls, you can soar through the sky, well, glide basically. So that adds more to it. But the combat itself is the most fleshed out part, and it, as I said, it is simple, but also fun.
Much like God of War, like
Mm.
I love the original 6 God of Wars. I'm not, as said in previous episodes, I'm not a big fan of the new one because it changed everything. And the original God of Wars I love for the simplicity, and I love this game for exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not as simple, like you can control the camera and it's free roam, so it's not as simple as the God of War. But
for me, that worked in its favour.
That worked very well in its favour, and the controls are simple in its favour, and it made it very pleasant to play. I could just run around chopping things up at the press of a button, and I loved that. You know,
Yeah,
at the hold of a button, I could do a spin to win, and I loved that. You know,
yeah. As I said, like, the simplicity is always, I think, it can be the best part about a game, and in this, it was perfect. Oh, obviously, it was so simple because of when it was made. So nowadays, games are more complex because there's a lot more you can do. But sometimes the more complicated works against it. And for this game, if it was more complicated, I don't think it would be quite as fun.
There's one aspect I really enjoyed, and I want to mention it, is the stealth. I love being able to eat someone and then turn into them. That's like a horror dream for me.
It's not even just like taking their place and whatever, but stealth combat in itself. You know, you just...
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah, stealth combat as a concept is a great thing, and for this game, if you wanted to go full out combat, you could do it, but you know, as you said, you could just sneak up behind the guy, no one's watching, bang, he's gone. That was fun.
I did also love how if you were about to sneak up and eat someone, that it would tell you who's looking.
Yeah, so you didn't accidentally do it, because for some games...
They just let you go.
Yeah, and you can sort of... You'll go, okay, I'm going to stealth kill him, and you press the button before your brain realizes they're being watched. So for this game, it stops you from stealth killing.
Well, it slows you down to make sure that that's what you want to do. It gives you option.
Well, what it does is sort of you can choose whether to go full out combat. So you could do press a button and stealth consume, but if you press stealth consume but he was being watched, it wouldn't let you do it. So you were told basically you can't stealth consume, you have to go all out, and then you could choose to grab them and make a show of it. So it had a prevention scheme for that, which it makes it a little bit easier, and obviously more complicated can be good, but the easier stealth combat fits for the game, it is done right, and it was fun.
Definitely.
So, yeah, the stealth aspect deserves a lot of appreciation, as with any game. And yeah, it was a relatively small thing, but it added a lot.
The game itself was just beautiful.
Yeah, and it's like the combat, there was so much variety, but on a simple scale. And there's a lot of potential in games like that. So for this game, honestly, I actually don't have a single bad thing to say about this game. I can't think of anything that isn't explained by the age.
The one thing I do want to talk about that I didn't enjoy was the picking up of guns and using them. I could never work it out. Like, the controls obviously must be simple, but I just never... I picked up a gun a couple of times, but I could never work out how to actually shoot it.
Normal attack.
Really?
You lock onto them and you just press square and it attacks.
So why can't it just be like COD came out at the same time with aim and shoot? Like, why can't it just be like that? Like,
because
that's gone back to it's simple, but it was a little complicated. I didn't know No one, it never showed me how to do that, and
It actually does in one mission show you the use of those. Like you use an RPG and it tells you how to use it. You use a grenade launcher rather against infected on one mission. Because you infiltrate one of the groups going around hunting and you destroy them, and you use a weapon for that.
Oh, so I didn't know that, and that was one thing I've never liked is because I never got the hang of it. So I'll have to go back and try again because it might change my opinion on that. But at the moment, that was the one thing I didn't like because I could not work it out.
For me, like I obviously understood how to do it, but it seemed kind of pointless to me.
Oh, definitely.
Unless you use a grenade launcher, you're not dealing enough damage.
You're given this super power. Why would you want to use a pistol or a rifle?
Yeah, like using an assault rifle does nothing. Using an RPG, I had a lot of fun because that was destructive. You could aim at a tank, they're gone. And I loved that part of it. But the use of guns, I found pointless. Simple as that. But for me, it wasn't a bad thing, just not for me. If that makes sense.
I give the whole game a solid 8 out of 10.
I'd probably say 9 out of 10. I try not to say 10 out of 10 because I tend to be...
Too lenient.
Yeah, I if I don't like to think about a game, I ignore it because I enjoy the rest of the game. So I can't say 10 out of 10 because that's being too generous. So for a 9 out of 10 it sounds fair because I'm just not a very critical person. But no, this is definitely a game I'm extremely glad I played. A game which I definitely love, and as I've said multiple times, I would love to see it remastered one day just so we can experience it all over again. But even if that never happens, I still had a lot of fun doing it. So yeah, I recommend this game. If you haven't played it, I do recommend getting it and giving it a go just for some fun. And that's about all we can say on that. So thank you for joining us once again, Blaze.
You're welcome. I love coming on here. As noted earlier in the episode, I won't be around. I won't have time to join Jeremy on his next few podcasts. So I hope you guys enjoy his next few episodes. I have no doubt they'll be brilliant.
Thank you, and we will make sure to have you back. And thank you, listening out there, all of you. I'm really glad to have you here, and I do hope you will join me again. But without further ado, we shall end the episode. So thank you for joining us. This is Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm Jeremy, signing off.